So day by day, 1440p and 4K gaming setups are becoming more and more common. That being said, not everyone has the budget for or even wants to game at above 1080p. For some people, 1080p is all they need, whether it's because you can't afford a monitor that is more than 1080p, or maybe you already have a 1080p monitor and you don't want to go out and buy a whole new monitor when you have a whole working one already, a 1080p one though. So whatever the reason may be, or maybe you just can't afford the graphics card powerful enough to power a 1440p setup in the games that you like to play, which can be very expensive, especially if you're a big fan of AAA games. Whatever the reason may be, not everyone wants something above 1080p for their gaming setup. So, if you want a 1080p gaming setup, the question becomes, maybe you want to game at ultra 1080p and with AAA games as well. You might wonder, what is the ultimate 1080p gaming card? The absolute best experience you can have at 1080p without spending any extra money on something that is overkill, but at the same time, making sure that you get all the performance that you can at 1080p, and you don't really need to turn down settings, at least not in most games. Of course, I'm not saying to max out everything, but at least the card that will allow you to play most games at 1080p. And oftentimes, it's heard that a card like this would be something like that is not an RTX card, because RTX cards are mostly intended for 1440p or 4K is generally the assumption. Like, they weren't really marketed as 1080p cards, that being 20 series and 30 series as well, obviously 30 series, but 20 series also to a lesser extent are more like entry. The 2060 is like an entry level 1440p card and not 1080p card. So the 1080p card that is the most powerful, that is actually intended for 1080p and not more than that, from NVIDIA, we're leaving AMD out of the question today, that's been released in the recent years, is the 1660 Ti. Yeah, if we include Pascal, then something like a 1080 Ti is of course more powerful than this, but the 1660 Ti is modern, it's still being manufactured, it's easier to get your hands on, and it's not an RTX card. So it's more affordable, obviously, than the RTX cards, which can get very expensive. So in this video, I'm going to answer the question, is the 1660 Ti the ultimate 1080p gaming card? So I purchased this 1660 Ti at Best Buy this morning, and I got a whole $7 off a $300 purchase. Wow, what a great discount. No, but seriously, all jokes aside, guys, I'm just going to start by giving you my first impressions of this card. The first thing I couldn't help noticing is just how light this card is. Like, it's just extremely light. Based on how light it is, you would think it's like a really budget card or something, but it's not that much of a budget card. It is a 1660 Ti. Something else I noticed just right off the bat, I want to mention this, is it only has one 8-pin connector, which is strange. I definitely expect to have more than that, since it is a pretty expensive card. It was $300. I mean, pretty expensive as in not like budget. It's not what I would call budget. It's more of a mid-range card is what I would say. And for 1080p, as we're about to see whether or not this is true, it's the best experience. But we will see, is it the ultimate gaming experience or not? So what I'm going to start is by showing you some benchmarks, and then later on I'm going to talk about other things like temperature, fan noise, looks, etc. All that, stick around for that after, but I want to start by showing you guys the benchmarks of how this card performs, and I'm going to be testing it in 4 titles, which are all very GPU demanding, or not all very, but quite GPU demanding, just because I want to trust the scenario of what you might be playing. Yeah, you might have a 1080p display and want to play esport titles. At that point, it matters more what CPU you have than your GPU, but that I'm just saying that in case you do want to play AAA titles, maybe you only like AAA really, or you want to have the premier experience with AAA titles at 1080p, that's why I'm going to test with, since we're testing a graphics card here, not a CPU. If I was doing a CPU, I would test esport titles. But since I'm doing a graphics card, we're going to be testing the more graphically demanding AAA titles. So I'm just going to give you an overview of the system, and we'll get right into it.
These are the full specs of the machine I'm using to test the 1660 Ti. I should also mention at this point, the 1660 Ti that I'm testing is the EVGA Superclocked Ultra Gaming version, with 6GB of GDDR6 video memory. Neither the graphics card or the CPU are overclocked at this time. Let's get into the game benchmarks. First up, Metro Exodus. In Metro Exodus with the high preset, the 1660 Ti averaged 75 FPS, which is quite respectable, although we do have to keep in mind that high in Metro Exodus is only the third highest of 5 settings. So it's not actually that high, but given how demanding Metro Exodus is, I thought it was best to use high settings. High still provided an extremely rich graphical experience in such a game like Metro Exodus, and lower than 75 FPS would not really be ideal in a game like this. In Crysis Remastered at high settings, the 1660 Ti got only 56 FPS. Now this is an extremely demanding game, but also being that it's a shooter, more than 56 FPS would certainly be desired. This is not ideal at all, but it is playable with 56 FPS, but truly if I wanted to enjoy this more, I would turn down the settings to medium. It's certainly playable on the 1660 Ti, but you really can't max it out if you want to have a smooth experience playing this shooter. On to Red Dead Redemption 2. I tested this game with the graphics slider 3/4 of the way full. The average FPS was 59, which was not bad at all considering how demanding this game is when you turn up the graphics, and the graphics were pretty high, although not completely maxed. The game looked great, and 59 FPS average was not bad at all, with the 1660 Ti very often managing frame rates above 60 in many areas. Overall, a great looking and very smooth experience at 1080p. Now for Mafia Definitive Edition. This game's closer to how demanding most AAA games that come out today are, and less demanding than the other three, so I just wanted to throw this one in. At high settings, and high settings is the highest in this game, there's no ultra, the 1660 Ti averaged 76 FPS, which was totally smooth for a game like this, where it's all that's really necessary. So in this case, the experience was certainly both very smooth and looked great.
Now there are a few other things I wanted to discuss with regards to this 1660 Ti, and one of those things is power draw. So this card draws a very modest 130 watts under full load, although keep in mind that that is without overclocking. So I'm sure some of you will be glad to know that the power draw is so low if you have a lower end power supply that can't supply as much wattage, like maybe 500 or below, but I still wouldn't cut it too close, especially if you're overclocking either this card or the CPU, because then the parts could definitely draw more wattage than they were originally intended to, and this could definitely cause your PC to crash. So I would not recommend overclocking in that instance. So as far as temperatures go, I was playing with this card, Mafia Definitive Edition, for about an hour, and the card was under full load the entire time, and the card never went above 78 degrees Celsius, which is not too bad at all, especially considering that my case, which is this one right here, only has one exhaust fan installed, and it's an 120 millimeter one, so it's not too bad at all considering that. I also want to address the issue of loudness, because this card was somewhat loud. It was not like the RX 570, which I did a review on not too long ago. I'll leave a link to that video in the description in case you're interested, but it was not loud like that card. That card was extremely loud, and it would just drown out even your CPU's fan and everything, and even the volume of your game some of the time. But this is not like that at all, and obviously if you're wearing headphones it matters even less, but even then it doesn't matter that much. But that being said, it was still considerably louder than my 2070 Super, which is still a much more powerful card, although that one is the MSI Gaming X version, and this is obviously an EVGA version. They also make a Gaming X version of the 1660 Ti, so I think those differences in sound might chalk up somewhat to to just the cards being of different sizes, and this one has a much smaller heat sink than my 2070 Super, so it's not able to dissipate heat as effectively, and it needs instead to have these huge fans. But either way, the noise was not terrible. It was still not ideal though. Now, even though this is mostly a matter of your opinion, I still want to take a minute to talk about the aesthetics of the card. So, when I looked at it online, I thought the card looked a lot worse than it does in person. It actually looks quite good, although it does not have any RGB, which is not really that surprising at this price point. But anyways, it does look quite good. And I'm not dissatisfied at all with how it looks. Not that you're going to be able to see it much in your case unless you have an entirely clear glass panel in the side of your case, because it does not have any RGB, as I said. Although, I just want to say, like, as far as aesthetics go, this would not be my top choice, even though it does look quite good. I personally would go something for more like something like this Gaming X version from MSI. I'm a big fan of this design, just how it looks. I don't know, some of you might agree, some of you probably think the EVGA one looks better, but let me know down in the comments anyways. Either way, it's a matter of opinion. I just wanted to say what mine was, and this does have RGB, but that's to be expected since this one is not a 1660 Ti. This is a 2070 Super. I'm just showing you the actual design to compare how they look. Anyway, now today, the million-dollar question is, of course, should you buy this or not? And let me just say, the 1660 Ti is a sublime card for a 1080p gaming experience. Really, it's true that you're not going to be able to max out every AAA game, but you are going to be able to max out the majority of them. And the ones that you cannot, as I've shown, the most demanding ones, those you still will be able to get pretty high up and they will still look great. And just to get those to max, it's not enough of a reason to shell out more money for something more expensive like an RTX card. That being said, I would not recommend that you buy this EVGA model in specific, just because it's not bad at all, but I would just recommend you buy the MSI Gaming X one. Aesthetically, you might prefer this one, in which case maybe buy this one, but this one is definitely louder than the MSI version, which also has a 0 RPM mode, which is quite nice. So I would recommend that you buy that one instead, or maybe even the Founders Edition, if I'm not sure if they have that actually, but anyways, this one is not really the one I would recommend. But that being said, there's also another thing that needs to be addressed. I would recommend this card for 1080p gaming, but I don't recommend that you buy it, especially not new today. And the reason is because while RTX cards are not really necessary just for a regular 1080p experience at all, there's a big elephant in the room, and that is ray tracing. And yes, ray tracing used to be a gimmick a few years ago when it came out first with the RTX cards, 20 series, Turing. Then it seemed more like a gimmick. But now support is increasing with new titles like Watch Dogs Legion and Cyberpunk 2077, especially this year, both getting ray tracing support, especially the latter one of those. I cannot wait to see the implementation. It looks amazing, and it's not something that you want to miss out on. Even if you're gaming at 1080p, you might as well get the benefits of ray tracing by getting an RTX card, which is only about $30 more than this for an RTX 2060. So for $30 more, you could get your foot in the door for ray tracing. And if you don't want to, because it's too demanding in some games and it just cuts your FPS too low, you just turn it off. But it's something you want to have access to in 2020 now that support's increasing and is no longer a gimmick. That's about all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit that like button and subscribe because I have a new video every single Sunday. I make a ton of videos like this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.